Today's going to be our first day of equations of lines. The first thing we're going to talk about is finding the slope of a line. So if you remember, we used to use the letter m for slope, and the slope of a line represents how steep it is. Okay, so m represents how steep it is. The formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so let's try a couple. So on number one, so if you remember, in a point, the first number is the x1, and then the second number is y1, x2, and y2. So your first numbers are always x's, your second number is always y's. So when you use the formula, y2 minus y1, so on top we'll have 5 minus a negative 3 over x2, which is 3, minus x1, which is 1. Now the biggest thing that you have to remember with slope is whenever you subtract a negative, minus minus like on top here, actually becomes plus. So 5 plus 3 is 8. On the bottom, 3 minus 1 is 2. And then you simplify when you can. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my slope for that line would be 4. Okay, number 2. Again, I like to list out my x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so if I do y2 minus y1, it'd be negative 4 minus 6 over x2 minus x1, which is negative 3 minus negative 2. Okay, on top we don't have a minus minus, but on the bottom we do have a minus minus. So negative 3 minus negative 2 actually becomes negative 3 plus 2. So on top, negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. On the bottom, negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. And 10 divided by negative 1 is negative 10. So that is my slope of that line. The next thing we have to talk about is different types of slopes. So you have parallel slopes. So if you remember parallel lines, those are the lines that are going the exact same direction at the exact same rate. So they have the exact same slope. So they have the same slope. Alright, so looking at number 1, so if my m for the line is 2/3, or my slope is 2/3, my parallel slope is also going to be 2/3. It's the exact same. Same thing if my slope was negative 3, my parallel slope would also be negative 3. Okay, so parallel means same slope. Perpendicular, however, if you remember perpendicular lines, those are the lines that intersect to make that 90-degree angle, or the perfect corner. Okay, which means these lines are exactly opposite of each other. They're going the exact opposite direction. Okay, and we represent that by having the opposite slope. And to create an opposite slope, like on this one, m equals negative 3/4. Not only do we have to make it a positive, okay, because opposite of negative is a positive, we also have to flip it. So opposite of 3/4 would be 4/3. So your perpendicular slope is flipped, and it's the different sign. Okay, for this one over here, the m equals negative 5. So if your slope is, positive 5, okay, the 5 is actually over a 1. So if I flipped that, I would get m equals 1/5. But since my slope was positive, my perpendicular slope has to be negative. Okay. Slope-intercept form, that's something you've also seen, but it's been a while. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Remember, the letter m represents our slope. B is what's called our y-intercept, which we'll get to on Monday. Okay, standard form, however, is ax plus by equals c. Okay, so let's look at the differences. Slope-intercept form up here is when y is by itself. Okay, when y is by itself, that's when you can tell me what the slope is. So that's very important for today's stuff. When it's in standard form, that's when x and y are on the same side. Okay, so I would take these notes down for sure. Slope intercepts y by itself. Standard form is when x and y is by itself, or on the same side, excuse me. Alright, so let's try a problem. So this type of problem says, what is the parallel and perpendicular slope to the line 2x minus 3y equals 6? So right away I know this is in standard form because the x and y are on the same side. And if you remember, in order to find the slope, we want to get it to slope-intercept form. So I want to make it look like y equals mx plus b. So in other words, I want to get y by itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this equation and we're going to solve for y. So the first thing we have to move is this 2x. Since the 2x is positive, we're going to subtract 2x. Okay, so I have negative 3y equals, and notice right here that the x is in front of the number, so we're going to write that negative 2x plus 6. Okay, y still isn't by itself, so I need to divide by negative 3. So I need to divide every single thing by negative 3. Okay, so when I do that, I get y equals, right here, a negative 2 divided by a negative 3 makes a positive 2 over 3x. And positive 6 divided by negative 3 is a negative 2. Okay, so there's my equation. So if you remember, m is the one that's right in front of x. So right now my slope is 2/3. Since my parallel slope is the same, that means that's my parallel slope. Okay, so that's my first answer. My perpendicular slope, if you remember, I have to flip it. So make it 3 over 2, and I also have to switch the sign, so I'm going to make it negative. So that's my perpendicular slope. Alright, let's try one more of those. So again, we're finding the parallel and perpendicular slope to this line. I know this line is in standard form because x and y are on the same side. So I need to solve for y. Okay, so I need to get the x out of there. Since the x is negative this time, it's like a negative 1x, I'm going to add it to the other side. Okay. And same thing, so we get 2y, and I want to put my x first, so instead of 8 plus x, I want x plus 8. Okay, y still isn't by itself, so I divide by 2 to everything, not just some of it. So I get y equals, this x actually is a 1, and 1 divided by 2 is not 2, but it's 1/2 x plus 4, because 8 divided by 2 is 4. So there's my equation. So if I find my parallel slope, it's the same slope as this. Remember, slope is in front of x. So my parallel slope is 1/2. Okay, so your parallel slope is whatever your slope was. My perpendicular slope, I have to flip that. So opposite of 1 over 2 is 2 over 1, and opposite of positive would make that a negative 2 over 1. So that is my perpendicular slope.